First of all, Harsh, I think we must draw a very clear difference between studying and learning, right? Uh, Padhna or seekhna, like we say, right? Uh, we may have had this confused, I'm afraid. Uh, our establishment has taught us that learning as we know is through textbooks. That is our primary medium of learning. That's how we prepare for exams. That's how we qualify for higher education, for jobs, and so on and so forth. But we are not taught that studying is a part of learning, right? It is our introduction. Let me scratch that. It is not even our introduction to learning. We learn much before we start studying, right? We learn an entire language before we even step into a school, right? So learning is something which is incredibly innate to the human condition, right? We have evolved as being adaptable creatures. If we were not adaptable, we would have been wiped out of the face of the earth, right? So we have learned to adapt to our environment. We have learned to grow a civilization. We have learned to grow languages. We have learned to stay together and develop a culture, right? All of these are acts of grasping knowledge, imbibing knowledge, and applying knowledge that are not limited to just institutionalized studying. Okay. So, what one prioritizes is graduating from being a student to being a learner. Okay. And then letting their role of being a student be a part of their learning journey. Okay. So, the learning part is not limited to their student years, it is not limited to their college years. Okay. So we end up justifying the application of each thing that they are learning, not only in practical terms, but also in the terms of developing their perspective, like I've mentioned previously. So that ends up making sense to the students. That if I am curious about this one thing that I'm learning in the class, it is because it is going to end up uh, contributing something to my growth. Okay, they may see it in that very moment, they may see it 30 years from now, that's okay, but they are aware, they are conscious of the fact that it is going to contribute something to my pool of knowledge, to my understanding, to my perspective about the world, and to my growth in the longer run, right? It is about playing the long game of learning. So that's a curiosity driven approach to learning that I think an institution like the one where I work at is something which we prioritize, right? In fact, we have a whole setup. We have a curiosity lab at IIT Gandhinagar, right? Which researches how curiosity can be sparked, how curiosity can be retained, how curiosity can be materialized in order to learn better, right? So we have two very interesting setups. Uh, we have a curiosity lab and we have a center for creative learning. Okay, both of these CL and CCL are very interesting setups because they investigate something which is not inherently tangible, right? Curiosity को आप quantify नहीं कर सकते, right? That's what we think, but if you notice curiosity, it ends up becoming a lifelong driving force. So if you start optimizing your curriculum, if you start optimizing your syllabus, all of that around the curiosity of the students, it ends up assuring it by itself that the students will not lose their interest, that the students will not feel like this is being imposed upon us. We try our best to do that, right? Now, coming to the point about how we can retain learning or how we can retain this habit of learning. So first of all, like I said, we must differentiate between being a student and being a learner. Being a student is a phase of your life, being a learner is a condition in your life, right? It is something which you adapt and you carry on for a lifetime. uh, Something which in fact I learned from my students is you have to understand the role of asymmetrical learning in your life, right? Asymmetrical learning is essentially everything that happens in a non-structured way. Okay, learning as such, if you think about it, doesn't have a structure to it. When we put a structure to it, it becomes a curriculum. When we put a structure to it, it becomes a syllabus, it becomes a classroom, it becomes a lecture, right? But learning at its spirit has no structure, right? You may learn, think about it this way, Harsh. Where do we learn bargaining? We don't learn bargaining, but we are so brilliant at it, right? We are masters at bargaining, right? But it is not taught to us. Negotiation is not taught to us. But bargaining is something which we have as a lifestyle of sorts, right? So it is not structured. It is not something which can be put into curriculum. So we must recognize how many things we are picking up in an asymmetrical way. If you're watching a YouTube video, for example, or if you're watching a web series, it is, we have classically been trained to think that all of these are wastage of time. You must stick to one textbook and learn and make notes and give exams and stuff like that. But if you're watching a YouTube video, if you've picked up something from it, that is also learning. That is also contributing to your overall bank of knowledge. All that we need to do is be intentionally recognizing that, and then using that knowledge whenever the time comes for it. Okay. You may have picked up a certain phrase. I am a student of language, right? I've studied languages. I've observed the uses of language across media. That's what I do. So if I pick up a certain phrase from, let's say, a web series, and if I use it in a daily life, I don't need to go consult Renan Martin. Renan Martin is somewhere around there, but I don't need to consult it to check whether this is the correct phrase or not. If it is spoken in a certain way, if I've used it correctly, that's learning. End of story, right? So I think we as conscious thinkers, recognizing all the different areas in which we pick up learning, will in itself do the job, right? It is not like we have to go out looking for a mental model and start applying it to our daily life in order to accelerate learning. That's not needed. It's not necessary. It's good if you do that, but it's not necessary. I don't want to put the pressure of that on anyone. Just be intentional and acknowledge the fact that you are picking up 20 different things when you step out of your house. Okay, and it is recognizing and it is registering something in your brain to your already existing pool of knowledge, right? And that asymmetry of learning will end up creating this entire universe of knowledge, an entire, what I like to call in my research, the narrative of knowledge, right? I use that phrase very often in my papers, the narrative of knowledge. It ends up constructing a narrative of knowledge in your own head, that okay, I picked this one thing up from this one show, I picked this one thing up from this one song, and that is how I have connected all these two or three different things in my mind. And it's a joy to discover all of these things in yourself, right? That I picked this one thing up from this one song that I heard. I know this one word because I heard this one TED talk. I know this one concept because I read this one book. And if all of those things start talking to each other in your head, that is what ensures that you keep learning for a lifetime. Because it's an endless chase, right? There is no end to it because it will only keep growing exponentially. And you won't even need to sit down and recognize and start taking notes and revising every now and then. Okay, mujhe itna pata hai, right? These are the 50 things that I know. It doesn't work that way. It is an organic process of growth.